I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. Today I'm interviewing Jen David Lang, who's making her fourth appearance on the show. She now holds the record. And there's a reason that I keep talking to Jen, mostly because I learn so much and she's a lot of fun to talk to. Jen produces The Main Idea, which is a monthly summary of a current education book. Jen has over 30,000 subscribers and has an incredible perspective on all things education. Today we talk about Paul Bambrick-Santoyo's new book, Get Better Faster, a 90-day plan for coaching new teachers. We get into Paul's model for coaching and how he recommends setting up an entire system. The part about real-time, in-the-moment feedback is particularly cool and kind of controversial. Enjoy this interview with Jen David Lang. I'm here with Jen David Lang. Jen, you are making your fourth appearance on the School Leadership Show.
Yeah.
I think you have the record right now.
Okay, I'll try to keep it.
So if this is the first time that you're hearing Jen and me talking, we have three other podcasts. The first one was an overview of Jen's work, The Main Idea. You want to talk a little bit about that, just so to pique people's interest?
Sure. The Main Idea is a service primarily for educational leaders. Each month I summarize an educational book in about 8-9 pages, and I write professional development ideas leaders can use with their staff based on the book. And it's a subscription service that you can subscribe to if you are a busy leader and would like summaries of great education and leadership books.
And our second one, so that one was so popular, people loved it. We came back for a second one where we talked about a book that you had reviewed called Thanks for the Feedback. And you went,
Yeah, that was with author Doug Stone.
right, and out of that one, which was also popular, now you're collaborating with Doug on an article, right?
Yes, we have an article coming out this May in ASCD's Ed Leadership, also about feedback, about how leaders inadvertently sabotage the powerful effects of feedback and how they can do things differently so they don't get in the way of the effects of feedback.
And well, I'm going to make a little note because I want to come back and talk a little bit about that towards the end.
Sure.
And then our third one was, I think you suggested the book initially to me about, because we are both raising teenage girls, and and it was remind me of the title.
Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood. Oh, that's the tagline, but
Right.
It's by Lisa D'Amour. It's called Untangled.
And that is probably my most recommended book to people these days. that one was a game changer in the Dowdy house, big time.
Yeah.
And
my teenagers are 13 and 15, and yes, that's popular here too.
wild. So, but today you're here because you have a recent Main Idea summary out on Paul Bambrick-Santoyo's new book. And what's the title of that one is Get Better Faster, right?
Yes. The tagline on that is a 90-day plan for coaching new teachers.
So before we get into that, you've reviewed other books by Paul Bambrick-Santoyo, and I know I've used his work a lot. Do you want to just kind of give sort of an overview of, his scope of work?
Yeah. Well, first, I absolutely recommend Paul Bambrick-Santoyo's work to educational leaders. He's probably one of the best thinkers out there in the field of educational leadership, and then he writes these incredibly coherent, clear, organized books to help leaders that are precise. And, one of his big claim to fame is that he can help show leaders how to develop teachers as much in 1 year as most teachers develop in 20. So it's hard to argue with that. But the thing about his books is that he really gives you the specifics to show you how to do that. That is the precise leadership actions that lead to teacher success. So I'm going to drink some water. His first book was called Driven by Data, And he introduced the 4 building blocks of data-driven instruction: creating rigorous assessments, analyzing them, the action that follows from them, and then creating a culture where data-driven instruction can survive and thrive. So that's
And
his first
and
book.
his
Yeah.
first book was a big foundational piece that we used in New York State as part of our regent's reform agenda over the last probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, when we started the movement to new standards, and there was a lot of training that went on statewide using his work.
Yeah, a very worthwhile training. And he does a lot of training and has a lot of people doing that kind of training as well. If you can get involved, it's really worth your time. And then his second book on school leadership was called Leverage Leadership. And it's about how leaders can best use their time to focus on instructional leadership. And this, to me, was kind of like the good to great for educational leaders. Basically, for a decade, Paul worked with thousands of school leaders and observed how exceptional leaders brought their schools from mediocre or good all the way to great. And he identified 7 areas of school leadership that dramatically improve student learning. So the first area was, of course, data-driven instruction. So you can go back to his first book. So his 7 areas that he focuses on in this book are data-driven instruction, observation and feedback, instructional planning, professional development, student culture, staff culture, and managing school leadership teams. I particularly like that last lever, the managing school leadership teams. So again, a second fantastic book. And if anybody who's listening to the podcast would like a free summary of either Driven by Data or Leverage Leadership, you can email me, mention Mike Dowdy, and I will be happy to send that to you. But both of these are fantastic books and provide a great foundation and sort of pave the way for this most recent book on school leadership.
So let's dive right in, and I'll make sure I put
Okay.
that note in the show notes about the summaries. So let's dive right in then. So in his most recent book, Get Better Faster, he has kind of talks about the skills, a lot to do with the skills that teachers need. But you want to kind of give an overview, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. So as everyone knows, plenty of authors are writing about the skills our teachers need, right? I mean, that's what most education books are about. And some of them are incredibly thorough. Like if you've ever seen John Safier's The Skillful Teacher, I think that book must be 500 pages long and lists every skill in the book. So there are lots of books that outline what teachers need to do. But how this book is different is that Paul Bambrick Santoyo helps leaders pick the most important skills our newer teachers need, and he lays them out in the order that they should learn them. So I'm sure you've had this experience, Mike, where you go into a classroom and there are numerous things that the teacher could improve, whether it's 3 items or 23 items. You could comment on a lot of things, but as we know, you don't want to provide a newer teacher with a laundry list of 23 things to do. So Paul has created a scope and sequence, which he calls the Get Better Faster scope and sequence, that outlines all of these specific actions that teachers can take to improve in the order that they should improve them. He says these should be done, in the first 90 days of the school year, before the summer, the first 30 days, the next 30 days, and then the final 30 days.
Well, and I think, and that was what struck me too. That yeah, we have all these books and resources and lists of what teachers need to do. But like you said, if you give a teacher all that feedback all at once, it's like drinking from a fire hose, and they can't, you can't get. They aren't gonna. They may be demoralized to begin with if they get all that feedback early on at one time. But then, yeah, I think sometimes we don't necessarily know where to start. So, where does he suggest that folks start when giving teachers feedback, or those essential skills that teachers need right up front?
Well, so what he does is he divides the type of skills into 2 areas. He says we need to be helping our newer teachers with their management skills. So he has, management skills from the summer, days 1 to 30, 31 to 60, 61 to 90. And then he says we also have to help teachers develop their rigor. So for rigor, he has what teachers need to learn to do during the summer, days 1 to 30, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the management trajectory looks pretty typical from what you would expect, right? In the summer, you're designing your routines and your procedures. You're figuring out how to speak to students, and you're figuring out how to get your whole class paying attention. And then for the rigor area, I like that he starts with obviously developing lesson plans, but he's very specific in what he chooses. He picks 3 particular areas that teachers should focus on: writing precise learning objectives, being able to script a basic I do, that is the part that the teacher does, and then designing an exit ticket. So just 3 basic components of lesson plans is where he suggests the teachers start. And for the next phase, often we help new teachers with, you got to ask questions, you've got to manage the class. But actually what he really focuses on is the point in the lesson where the students are working independently. He thinks that students should be able to work independently before they work in groups, before they engage in discussions. So that's something that's a little bit different. But then the other thing he does at the same time is for each of these sections, he talks about how to coach teachers. Because we can all name millions of things that teachers should be doing better, but how do we get those teachers to do that? And so he talks a lot about the principles of coaching teachers. Principles, PLES.
Right. And so what are the main, so you had mentioned that's the language he uses in the book, is the different phases. So that phase 1 that's the first 30 days, or how, mm-hmm. And is that how he breaks it down?
Yeah, phase 1, yes, and then phase 2, phase 3,
and phase 4. Yeah, go ahead.
The phase 1 is what he considers the summer before.
Okay, so in terms of, how do you do it then? So we know these things need to be coached in teachers and supported by school leaders. So what's his big aha in terms of how to do that?
Well, this is where he does differ from a lot of people, and he's got some really interesting ideas here for coaching teachers. But to begin, before we hit these phases at all, he sort of has 3 larger foundational principles of coaching. And I just want to outline those. The first one is, and this is his language, go granular. And what that means is coach teachers on just 1 or 2 skills at a time. They can't take in more than that. And I know we've heard that many times, but it's still very hard when you're sitting down with a teacher not to provide a laundry list. So really focus on 1 or 2 skills and be precise. And he has actually a number of case studies where you can read the case and figure out what is the one specific recommendation you would give to this teacher. I don't know if you want me to give you an example of one.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful because I'm having trouble picturing it.
Sure. Okay. So he gives an example of Principal Christina, who enters John's classroom and she's observing 9th graders who are finishing up a math exercise. And John, the teacher, says, "Time is up. I need all eyes on me." Most of the students look up, but some gaze off in the distance or fool around with materials under their desks, while John asks, "Who knows the answer to the first question?" While one student, Darius, begins to answer the teacher's question, another student passes a note and a few begin to whisper. The teacher says, "Wait, Darius," and he looks around to see who is causing the disruption. So that's all. The principal's just there for a few minutes. So she steps out, Christina, and she wonders what is the one bite-sized action step that would be most helpful with this clear problem with classroom management. So typically, as school leaders, we might say, "John, you need to improve your classroom management." That's not helpful at all, right? It's not specific. Classroom management encompasses many, many things.
Right.
So maybe we try again. So we try to get more specific, more granular. John, be sure to immediately redirect any students who are off task. It's a little bit more specific. You're telling him what to do, but it's still really, there are millions of ways to redirect students. So what Paul Bambrick-Santoyo suggests is that we get even more specific and we say, John, you need to deliberately scan the room for on-task behavior before you move on. Choose 3 or 4 of those places in the classroom, which we call hotspots, where you know whispering often occurs. Constantly scan those areas. And what does that mean to constantly scan? You need to be seen looking. Crane your neck, show with your eyes that they know that you're looking. So that's the kind of level of detail that that Paul is going for in this book.
Well, and
that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I think that's one of those things where, as a supervisor walking through, almost like you know it when you see it. So yes, this teacher has that classroom management, situational awareness to be able to, visibly show that they're paying attention and monitoring those hotspots. But it might not be something that comes naturally to every new teacher or even every seasoned teacher.
Exactly. And it also may not come naturally to us as leaders to know specifically what to recommend. And so that's where his scope and sequence comes in handy. So you observe this class and then you go through your scope and sequence, starting from the very first phase. And you look at what is the first item. Oh, okay. My teacher has mastered steps 1 and steps 2. Here we go. It's step 3 where the teacher is beginning to break down. So I'm going to mention something about this.
And I would think, too, by going granular, that kind of lends itself to the kind of feedback that you would be able to give based on a quick visit to a classroom.
Exactly. You can't do more than that anyway. So that's what you're aiming for. So his first principle is go granular. His second principle of coaching teachers is to plan, practice, follow up, and repeat. And this, I'll tell you what this means and how it's different. What he means is to help your teachers plan out what they're going to do. And then you actually practice with your teachers. And that's something I know we don't do in a lot of schools, where we have teachers actually stand up and practice with us even one-on-one, where we act as the student and they act as the teacher. No. And to follow that and repeat that. Yeah, go ahead.
So, no, I was going to say, it seems so obvious, right? That, if you want somebody to be able to do a behavior, to have them practice it. But in the, 15 or 20 years that I've been doing teacher observations, I don't think I've ever had that sort of practice one-on-one with the teacher. I've done it as a school administrator where I've coached other administrators through like how to have a difficult conversation that's coming up for them, where we've kind of role played it, but I've never gotten to that level with a teacher.
It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. You have to have a certain level of trust and a relationship, and it also has to be part of your school culture. It's not just that you're calling one teacher out and this teacher is doing so poorly that he needs to practice with you. No, it has to be what you're doing with everyone. And also I should mention there's a DVD with the book or a link online if you buy Get Better Faster, and he has videos. So you can actually watch administrators practicing with teachers one-on-one as well as in a group to see what practice looks like, because that is something that is not commonly done in our profession.
Now, have you been able to, because I know you do work directly with schools and with teachers, have you been able to kind of operationalize any of that work with the folks that you're working with?
Lots of his ideas, absolutely. I think his work applies to many different aspects of educational leadership. But the practicing is a hard thing unless you're working in a school that has that already set up as part of the culture. And that's got to happen in the summer, from the leader, from the beginning, so that it's something that teachers know and are expected to do. And you can see on his videos from the summer PD that all of the teachers together are preparing preparing for rolling out new routines with students, preparing for what the first day of school looks like, preparing for giving students instructions and having them follow through 100%. So I think it's a huge piece that is missing right now in schools.
So I would imagine that if the school culture to a place where that is the norm, then I would imagine those kind of coaching conversations wouldn't necessarily just have to be between the administrator and the teacher, but I would imagine teacher to teacher too.
Absolutely. And we've spoken about the power of teams and how certainly if this can happen within teacher teams as well, then it's just another tool for improving teacher practice.
Very cool.
So, and then his third principle is to make feedback more frequent. And this is another area that we have heard that, but the way that Paul interprets this and operationalizes this is different. So one of the things that is different about his coaching suggestions is he is a big fan of real-time feedback to teachers. So what that means is, as an administrator, when you're in a classroom, if you see something going wrong, you actually provide feedback on the spot. And the thinking behind that is that why should we wait and have that group of students miss out on the learning that could be happening? And why should we miss out on the opportunity to provide the most immediate feedback possible to teachers? It's on the spot. So this is very controversial. I definitely have colleagues who are against this idea of real-time feedback. But let me give a few examples of what that means, because so few of us are actually doing that. So what real-time feedback might look like. Should I give some examples?
Absolutely.
So first of all, he is a big fan of doing that. He absolutely believes the only way to do this is if you can do it respectfully. And he believes you should start with the least invasive real-time feedback possible. So for example, start with a non-verbal gesture. So if, for example, the teacher is doing a bad job of the action step called square up, stand still, which is actually from Doug Lemov's Teach Like a Champion. So the teacher is slouching and shifting from foot to foot, and using a quiet voice. And we need the teacher to square up, stand still, take more command of the class. Without interrupting anything, you could just have it known between you and the teacher that if you exaggerate your posture with arched shoulders to show the teacher to stand up, to square up and stand still, that will remind the teacher. So that's one very non-invasive way of doing real-time feedback, is just doing that in the back of the classroom.
But it does. But it's one of those things where you can't just show up tomorrow and start exaggerating your posture in the back of a classroom. I mean, these are conversations and almost like routines that need to be set up ahead of time. Like it requires some communication up front.
A lot of communication. That, first of all, even the idea that when you are observing, your role is not just as observer, that you will also be helping to improve teacher practice in the moment. That has to be, again, the norm, the expectation. You can't do this out of nowhere. That would completely discredit the teacher.
Does he this is where it kind of goes off into culture and stuff. Does he give suggestions on how to, like, an entry point for that? I know the nonverbal piece, but like having those conversations and starting to build that culture within a building where people feel safe and are open to that kind of real-time feedback.
Yeah, he, in all of his books, has detailed staff development plans for introducing a lot of his ideas. He includes resources, mapped out plans, I think even PowerPoint. I mean, he has all of the materials you need. I don't write professional development suggestions for his books because he always has such detailed. So he definitely understands the importance of leaders introducing these newer ideas to staff over the summer, and he outlines a lot of that in the book and in the supplemental materials. So you can certainly look through that. But you're absolutely right, Mike. This can't come out of the blue. It's not something that we do new in education, typically, to do this real-time feedback. It's a newer idea, and it has to be done well, or it will completely bomb. And I don't mean bomb the lesson. I mean the relationship between the teacher and the administrator.
So you mentioned kind of as you started talking about the real time feedback idea. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for the next 3 days. But you said that you have colleagues that are really resistant to this idea of giving feedback in the moment. You want to say more about that? Like, what have you heard?
Well, I don't want to call anybody out, but no, I think that there's a real concern about having respect for teachers as professionals who are making hundreds of decisions on their feet all the time in every classroom, and that it's appropriate to wait until after the lesson to catch the teacher in the hallway or at a regularly scheduled meeting, debrief with the teacher about what could be done better. And I don't know if these colleagues have seen the specific suggestions Paul Bambrick-Santoyo has laid out. So that's why I was wondering if you want to hear some specific examples, because I think that helps make it more real and you can see how it can be done in a respectful way.
Yes, absolutely. That would be helpful.
Yeah. So, so the first level is this nonverbal, where obviously you're, as the principal or instructional leader, you're in the back of the classroom and nobody can see you except the teacher. Then a slightly more invasive method is called the whisper prompt. So all the students are working in groups or independently, and very quietly you say to the teacher, when everybody's finished with this activity, I want you to use only 5 words. Pencils down, eyes on me. Because this teacher has not been using economy of language. This teacher has been babbling on and on and on, and we need to get the teacher to say fewer words. So you whisper these 5 words to the teacher, assuming none of the students hear that, and then the teacher is prepared for this next direction. So you've got the nonverbal approach, and then you've got the whisper prompt.
Okay, then what?
Then, obviously, a more invasive approach is modeling, where the students are doing something incorrectly, a certain routine, and you raise your hand as the principal and you say, oh, Mr. So-and-so, this is my favorite routine. Can I show the students a new way to do it? So that's obviously the most invasive, where you actually take over the class with permission. Can I do this? The teacher is questioning very slowly and needs to pick up the rate of questioning, and you raise your hand and say, can I ask the next 3 questions? And you model how to ask questions at a quicker pace.
Now that's so funny, because I feel like I've done that as a principal before, where especially for folks where you're comfortable and you have a good relationship, of kind of joining in the lesson in that way. But I don't know that I was that purposeful about it in terms of a strategy.
Well, I think it's helpful to think about this continuum as he lays it out, the nonverbal to the whisper to the modeling. And you can decide as a school what you feel comfortable with. Maybe you just want to start with the nonverbal and the whispering. So I think that it helps to see that that real-time feedback can look different. There are different ways of doing it. There are different levels of invasiveness. But you can certainly see the benefits. I don't know if you found it beneficial to do the modeling that you did, but to have the students benefit and then the teachers benefit in real time.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I almost think about it too, like what I imagine in like a medical model, where if somebody was learning, like a med student was learning to do something, they would get the feedback in real time, because you wouldn't want to hurt somebody.
Yeah, and Paul Bambrick-Santoyo, he uses that example in the book. Of course, we wouldn't have a more experienced doctor close her mouth when supervising an intern, because you wouldn't want the patient to get sick or die. So, obviously we're not dealing with that same level, but why not? Why not assume that teachers that students' time is precious, and we should maximize it any way possible.
I love that. So, wow, and that's just one a tiny piece of his whole approach here in this 400-page book, right?
Yeah, well, what he does, like I said, for each phase, he sort of focuses on what do we want to help our teachers with, and how. And so that is a big part of the how. And he has these in-depth charts, which there's no way to fully explain it on a podcast. You have to look at them. But as part of this whole scope and sequence, for each small action step that you would give to your teachers to say, this is what you need to do next, he outlines when would you need to provide this suggestion to a teacher? What are some questions you as the leader can ask the teacher? Then he gives you suggestions for how you can practice with the teacher. And then he gives you cues for real-time feedback if that's appropriate. Obviously, not every action step is about real-time feedback. Like if it's planning lessons, there's no real-time feedback suggestion. So he has all of these very specific suggestions, questions to ask the teacher, how to coach the teacher, that are very thorough, and you really have to look at it because it is so complex.
Well, I'm looking at one of them
yeah.
in the summary, like
Okay.
the designing an exit ticket aligned to the aim of the lesson. So you would use it when, either the teacher doesn't have an exit ticket or it isn't lined up with the objective or the aim of the lesson. And then probing questions associated with that. What key question or task at the end of the class will show students have mastered the aim, and then kind of walking the teacher through that, which I think that kind of concrete example helps because like we started talking about, there's so much that goes into teaching that you can't possibly know everything all at once or get feedback on it all at once.
No, and so to very specifically focus on the exit ticket that's fantastic. That's a fantastic meeting between a leader and a teacher, and that he gives you specific questions you can ask and specific tasks that you can do with the teacher, right? That you can sit down and let's examine the rigor of your exit tickets for the last week. That's a fabulous activity to do with the teacher rather than just speak in generalities about checking for understanding.
Exactly. Now,
so go ahead.
And that kind of falls into that rigor part of it, because you said there's the management piece and then there's the rigor. So, what else kind of jumps out at you in terms of, where folks ought to go based on, your reading of his work? Like where, I know he kind of lays out where to start beginning of the school year and stuff. Do you want to talk more about that, sort of that entry point?
Well, the entry point, that's a lot of that is about the practicing for the routines that you're going to roll out. And I think that's some of what we have seen before is a lot of focus on the management routines. But in terms of the rigor side, I love a lot of what he has to say. He talks about in the first 30 days, like I said before, how do you master the independent practice piece? That is when students are working. Often new teachers think, oh, great, I gave them a task and now the students are busy, they're quiet, I did that well. So what he does is he raises the rigor by doing three things in this phase. First of all, if you're asking your students to write a paragraph comparing and contrasting X and Y, he has the teachers write an exemplar of what they expect students to do. So I don't know how many of your teachers do that, Mike, but I also think that that's not something that's so common, that the teachers write an exemplar.
I would yes, I would agree with you.
And that's an example of practice that isn't okay, practice giving these instructions. This is a different kind of way to get your teachers to practice. So everybody is going to give an assignment tomorrow to your students, whether it's math, science, history. So right now, write out what would be an example of a perfect response. So I think that's fabulous that he has them do that. And then for the independent practice piece, he really has them think through what are the routines that are involved in independent practice. So, for example, having students write first and then talk second. So if you're going to have a discussion, have everybody write first. That's always a great practice. Have a do now. We've all heard that, or something that the students do as soon as they come in. So the second part is he really has teachers think about how they're going to do the independent practice. And then the third piece is to monitor aggressively. And that is the role that teachers play in checking students' independent work. So like I said, often this is a time where teachers think, whew, I have a few minutes to breathe. But he says, no, that's when we've got to be very aggressive. And I love these ideas. First of all, contrary to popular belief, he says teachers should map out a path that they're going to walk through the classroom and always starting with the students they think will have the easiest time. Because otherwise you get trapped with that student who's struggling and you don't monitor the whole class. So he says, pass through the students who are doing the best job so that you can quickly get through them. And then go to the students who are more struggling. And he actually has teachers map out a physical route in the classroom, which I think is fabulous.
That is fantastic. And again, I feel like that's something that master teachers naturally do, whether they stumble upon it and just happen to figure out that it works over time, or if they are thinking purposefully about it. But I think that's such an important thing to make explicit, particularly for new teachers, because I think back to my first couple years teaching, and I seriously feel like I should give that school district their money back. based on what I was like my first couple of years. But you're so focused on what you're doing as a teacher that you're almost unaware that there are students in the room. So by kind of flipping it and saying, okay, now be purposeful, think really carefully about exactly where you're going to go and when you're going to go.
Yes.
What a great way to flip it on its head.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head in saying this is, when you said, Mike, this is naturally what our best teachers do. So this is what Paul did. He didn't come up with this out of, in a dream. He went out and he studied thousands of school leaders. School teachers, and he found the ones that were the most effective. And he looked at what school leaders were doing, and they were coaching teachers on this kind of thing. Like, look at the path your teachers are walking. Are they getting stuck on the struggling students, or are they able to monitor everyone? So he's based this on what school leaders are doing effectively, and also teachers. And he's breaking it down for us. So I think that's why it's so helpful.
Yeah, and I like that it's explicit, because I can see, I've asked questions before of teachers following observations. How did you decide which students to talk with first, or things like that. But this is much more direct in terms of think about where you're going to go to the the highest performing students first. I mean, I don't know. It's just that's fascinating to me that. It isn't something that we naturally talk about explicitly, but it makes so much sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the third part of this is having teachers with that exemplar they wrote, that they know what they're looking for, and they have a coding system to affirm correct answers or to note when students need to make improvements. So let's say I've written my exemplar paragraph contrasting X and Y. So I know what I want included in my students' work, and they know I'm looking for evidence. So let's say the first 4 students I look at, their papers are fabulous. They have perfect evidence contrasting X and Y. I don't want to spend a lot of time, so I'm going to put an E on each of their papers, and that means you've shown the evidence. And obviously, they know this coding system. And then the next 3 students that I'm monitoring, they don't have enough evidence. So maybe I write NE, no evidence. And again, they know this coding system. I'm not spending a lot of time, but the expectation was for them to have evidence in their paragraph, and they don't have it. The same is true, obviously, in math. It could be anything from, the answer is 16.12. And so very quickly you could put checks or X's or something very quickly so that you can get through the class and know who's understanding, who's not, and also help those students in the moment without spending too much time on each student.
I love it. Now, I want to be sensitive to your time. I can't believe how fast time goes when we're talking.
Yes.
And so the book, Get Better Faster by Paul Bambrick Santoyo, you did a spectacular summary of it that's long, because the book is long. And I wanted to, kind of in this mode around feedback too, you had mentioned at the beginning of the podcast about the work that you're doing with Doug Stone around... And that's also around teacher feedback, right? Or giving feedback?
It's about feedback, the idea of feedback for leaders in general. And we sort of, because it's an article, it's short, we just focused on 2 ways that leaders inadvertently sabotage the powerful benefits of feedback. And just in a nutshell, because we are short on time, the first way is because leaders often combine evaluation and coaching in the same meeting with teachers. So if you know you're getting a rating from me and I'm giving you feedback on how to improve your teaching, all of the feedback and coaching gets drowned out because as a teacher, you're very focused on that evaluation. So the first suggestion is to separate, make sure evaluation and coaching meetings are separate so that teachers can really hear the coaching and really take it in.
Well, and that fits perfectly with what we were just talking about, because you're not giving a rating if you're just in the classroom for a short period of time and the feedback is in real time.
Yes, so exactly. No rating.
So that helps.
I hadn't thought about that. Yes. There's no way that real-time feedback is about a rating. I'm sure Paul would appreciate that. That's great. And then the other part of feedback has to do with when you're on the receiving end as a leader, that sometimes we tend to dismiss feedback if small parts of it are inaccurate or seem off. So, for example, if the results from the state tests come in and my school didn't do as well in math as we had anticipated, and the superintendent has some strong things to say to me about the math results, and I dismiss the feedback because I say, that superintendent, he didn't even teach math. He used to teach English. So, what am I going to listen to him? That sometimes we dismiss feedback too readily. And there may be parts of the feedback from the superintendent that were partially off. But instead, if we can put ourselves more in the mode of looking for what's right about the feedback, that really we can take more charge of our own learning.
Very cool. So that article, what's the title of the article? Are you allowed to
the
say?
Editors are still deciding. They get the final say.
Nice. And that's going to be in Ed Leadership, right?
Yeah, in May.
Very cool. So, Jen, once again, I mean, time number 4, I feel like it gets better every time. It's so much fun to talk with you, and I love how we can kind of go everywhere. Where can folks go to learn more about you and the main idea and the stuff that you're working on?
They can just go to themainidea.net.
Okay, and that's where people can sign up to receive the main idea, the subscription. Can all go through there?
Yeah, they can sign up there. You can see the books I've summarized. I'm in the middle of an ambitious project to put a database on there, so you can type in a topic you're interested in, and it will show which books will cover that topic.
Very cool. Well, Jen, thanks again. Great conversation, and you do hold the record of the most appearances on this show, and it hopefully won't be the last. And
okay.
And thank you.
All right. Thanks to you, Mike. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show. You can send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. Please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment, and pass the show along to your colleagues. If you'd like to support the show in a different way, please visit www.patreon.com/leadership.